Hello there, Lily.
Hi.
So lovely to meet you. We've had a great chat leading up to this, but now we've got to talk about it.
Yes.
Lovely to now talk about your recovery and how it's changed your life. So we usually start by looking at what was your life like when you were number six. So how long have you been going on for? How did it start? Whatever you feel is useful.
Yeah. It really is kind of wild to think back and really even recall what that was like, because I think it's so, for so many people, it feels like a whole other unusual world. Um,
And you were
but I,
very active before then, weren't you? You were an athlete.
yeah, I was. I was a runner in high school and then did some triathlons in college. But more so just active, loved being outside, hiking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but just like, it's kind of funny talking to an audience that doesn't know me at all, but it really, looking back, I could describe it as this, it's this both and experience. It's this sort of prior to really looking at myself, being honest with myself, doing some of that very uncomfortable digging,
Yeah.
and at the same time sort of I was this sort of like big bright personality, for better or worse, that just was very interested in doing all things, and pushing myself to the max. I was sort of the like classic kind of goodest person, I would say, perfectionist kind of thing.
Okay.
um but it really started for me, when I look back. I see that I've had um TMS, neuroplastic pain, etc., mind body syndrome since I was a child. But I would say the sort of illness time really started in 2013, 2014. So kind of right after I graduated college. And I I actually now can look back and pretty securely identify that when I studied abroad my junior year of college, it really disrupted sort of the protective structure and lens that I had created,
Right.
like my view of the world, myself in the world. It just disrupted so many things. And when I um, came back from Zanzibar, Tanzania, I was really depressed. And I don't even think that I would have said that at the
Right.
time, but I felt that sort of kind of classic reverse culture shock. Um, a lot
Mm.
of sort of existential dilemma and sort of shifting moods. And I think really what it was, I was having these thoughts and feelings that were kind of intimidating the whole rigidity of my structure,
Yes.
my sense
Yeah.
of self.
That would be a big shift to go somewhere like Tanzania, wouldn't it? That
Yeah.
really wouldn't. And I recall that from when my daughter spent a year in Peru and then came back. And within a day of coming back, we went to a huge mall, basic shopping mall. It was just, she'd been
Yeah.
working in a children's home for a year. And it was, and
Wow.
we were warned about this culture shock. She was only
Yeah.
what they would was that when they come back. So I can really relate to how that must have felt.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very unsettling, I think. And I felt like there's a lot of duality to it. I think I felt when I was there, it was a pretty immersive program. And so I had homestays, I was learning Swahili, felt just really engaged, connected in a way, like as simple as those words sound. It was in a way that I was kind of unfamiliar with because my life had been so um kind of guarded, like personality wise. So yeah,
So
I think I just
less
kind of cracked
authentic,
open. Yeah,
less
yes.
authentic.
It's a great way to say it. Yes. And then I was there and I just felt like my heart crack open. I felt, just connected to people. I felt like a lot of the rules went away in terms of social engagement, so that was a really beautiful experience. And then coming home and really sort of falling into a depression, I kind of started to have some controlling behaviors then, some eating disorder stuff, some other stuff came up that was really because I was starting to feel very unsettled. I think I was
living an unauthentic life.
Yeah.
Being who you felt you should be, presumably.
Yeah. And it was, at the time, I think this is common for many folks going through this experience over multiple years, is like then I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known that I was trying to fit myself back into this box I didn't want to be in. And so I was in my senior year of college. And
so how old is that, people in the UK?
Oh, right. I think I was 21.
Okay.
Yeah, so 20 or 21 typically. If you're on sort of the normative trajectory. But I had some anxiety and digestive distress and some eating disorder stuff starting to come up, kind of. That was the primary symptoms. So, and I won't sort of go into it like in too much depth, but I did a cross. Yeah. I did a cross-country bike trip when I graduated college. So myself and two of my girlfriends took a bicycle from the coast of Maine to the coast of Washington State.
Wow.
This is a really big adventure, another very expansive experience. And, a bunch of just sort of like general life changes, right? Natural human development struggles at these times, I think, that occur, but they're really amplified. And I was starting to get in touch with some of my childhood traumas at that time and getting some mental support, maybe a couple years in. But over the course of, this time, I got engaged and got married to my partner, who I'm with, moved here and there and changed my career and did all this valuable training in Hakomi. And I'm now a somatic psychotherapist and, had all of these quote unquote wonderful things happen, but I was really struggling. So, I think my symptoms would sort of be chunked. Like I'd have like 6 months to a year and a half of like this particular kind of experience of a symptom. Right. And I would find some kind of method or doctor or drug or modality that would like tie it up in a little bow for a couple months, and then something else would come up. Totally.
And it's interesting, it's not till people start this journey that they then can track back and see that happens.
Right. Right, exactly. Like in my mind, it was I would be unwell, and then I would get better, be unwell, and then I would get better. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, nope, I was not well.
Yeah. It's presented in different ways.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's riddled with a lot of, and I know this is a common experience for folks, hopelessness and frustration, lack of support, sort of feeling like a lot of sort of foot in mouth kind of things where you're just like, this person's not going to get it, so I'm not going to talk about it. So it's sort of like that self-perpetuating isolation that can happen of just like, I'm tired of not being understood. I'm tired of getting the same looks from doctors. I'm tired of my family tiptoeing around this situation, but also caring a lot and obviously being scared,
Yes, right.
But you're just kind of like, I'm just going to pretend I'm fine. I'm just going to pretend it's fine. So that was definitely
and you mentioned as well, I was just looking, you mentioned this low self-worth, not surprising with that, all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say you know, I mean, I think at one point I've done a lot of workshops and lectures in sort of the physical therapy realm actually over here. And I I remember for one of the presentations I did last year, I came up with this like list of all the things I was diagnosed with and all of the modalities I tried. And I looked at that and I was like, this is
Wow.
insane. This is insane.
Absolutely.
You know, all of the sort of, I mean, I had like, I was given a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease at one point, called it's called reactive arthritis. It's actually a
Mhm.
form, it's not quite rheumatoid arthritis, but I had, you know, very visible redness and swelling and pain in my feet for
Mhm.
about a year and a half, 2 years. Um, that was a pretty scary one for me. And then, and yeah, I did a lot of functional medicine. I eventually got to the really sort of functional medicine side, to close out that chapter. And then I think after that I had just this like sort of swelling, you know, in different joints on the left side of my body, and
Just the
like
left.
just the left, pain in the left side of my body,
Yeah.
um, hip, and like in my clavicle, and then shoulder pain, you know, like lots of MRIs, and they're like, maybe that's a tear, and you're like, oh, okay. um
So
so that,
lots and lots of symptoms
lots and lots, I mean,
over,
it
over a
goes
period of
on.
years, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is obviously like, I would say it was about 9 years of struggling with different chronic pain symptoms,
And
all
when,
said
at
and
your
done.
lowest point, how did that affect your life?
Yeah. You know, I think that the lowest point really was when I recognized that, or I no longer really felt like functional medicine and like controlling my lifestyle and my thoughts and my, you know, was really going to work. Like when that really obviously was not going to work anymore,
Very
I started,
controlling type like dietary. You know, people are trying to use diets for their stomach problems. Very
yeah,
controlling.
yeah,
Himself.
yeah. My eating disorder like skyrocketed during this treatment because, you know, at one point I was like, you know, it's just, you get to that place where like, what can I eat?
Yes.
And obviously I wasn't an athlete, I wasn't very active during this time, so thank goodness for that. But you know, I think it was, a lot of the underlying issues get worse.
Mm.
And so, but so to answer your question, I think that my darkest time was really in the last sort of phase of pain, was really like, it was sort of like glute muscles, low back, hip
Yeah.
pain. um and that, I mean, that was like, you know, it's still even wild to think about it. I actually remember when I sort of first found this work, and I heard someone say or read somewhere about like, once you get in touch with the emotions that are underneath the physical pain,
Mm.
you're like recognize that it's kind of worse in its own way. Like once you start to face it and feel it and like acknowledge it. And I remember when I had this pain, I was like, I won't curse, but you can imagine when I was like, no way. You like,
Yeah.
there's no way there's
Just
anything
gonna
worse.
feel my emotions.
Yeah. I'm like, bring it in. I bring it on. I'll feel whatever you want me to feel to get rid of this pain.
Yeah. And again, notice that to get rid of this pain. I mean,
Exactly.
you have to learn pretty quickly
Exactly.
that that's not the way to
Yeah.
resolve your pain. Yeah.
But it kind of spoke to like, my point is that, you know, when I really genuinely was doing the emotional work and the trauma work and the things I needed to deal with, it, in many ways, there is a kind of pain for me in that emotionally that was like, that was worse. You know, there was like a personal reckoning that I had to do that was in this way harder. And I say that, you know, with a lot of understanding of how debilitating the physical symptoms are. I mean, I remember like there was a lot of variability in my physical symptoms. Like we got a puppy at one point to kind of help me feel engaged and like help me feel like I could get out of the house and give me a reason to get out of the house, because it was getting so insular. You know, like your green zone, safe zone just gets, if you
Yes.
don't push it, just gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would try to walk her most days. Some days that was like literally just sort of like take a couple steps and be outside and then bring her in. And some days I could walk a couple miles. But you know, there were nights where the pain would kind of reach that scary level, like couldn't walk. My husband would sometimes carry me around the house, like things like that.
Wow. You were saying when you emailed initially, you were saying that you felt that you'd lost your identity as an athlete. That must have been a huge thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I'm sure that you see this, Georgie, just this experience of like being in that much uncertainty for a prolonged period of time is its own kind of torture for a human. You know,
Yes,
it's an
absolutely.
intolerable, you know, when you can have a sense of understanding and you can have a sense of this is what's going on and this is how I can move forward. I think that like the grief with that and the identity loss, all of those things, you can kind of wrap your head around in some way. Not to say that it's easy, but I think I was just like, you know, while I was sort of grieving this identity, I was also just like, what is happening? You know, that kind of like not knowing what to expect from one day to the next.
And it's no wonder that, you know, sometimes it can be even more painful when you start dealing with the emotions. Because that's what you've been protected from feeling. And that's
Exactly.
quite often, you know, when we're working with people, it's about first of all teaching them to feel their emotions, but actually helping them then to feel safe feeling their emotions. You're a somatic psychotherapist now as well, and you know that's so important, isn't it? Because otherwise, it's even more challenging if you just say, right, well, just go and journal about your, you know, traumatic experience that you had, and you actually your brain's protecting you from that, and
Yeah.
therefore the pain can come up.
Yeah.
That's why we really encourage people to learn how to ground, how to self-soothe, how to regulate in and out, so that they build their window of tolerance to be able to feel the emotion.
Yeah.
They feel safer when you start.
Definitely. I mean, that's really well said. And the one of the ways I'll describe it to my clients is a little bit is essentially what we're doing is exposure therapy of yourself to yourself.
Yes.
You know, we've got all of these mechanisms our whole lives. Many of us, this is a common human developmental process. Yeah. And it really does, for me, it felt like exposure therapy for sure. You know, and I'll still joke with my clients, you know, like, oh yeah, I don't want to journal, like blah, you know, just it's normal. It's work. And I think for us, you know, this particular strain of human is
I love that.
It's okay to be like, I hate this. Yeah. And like you're allowed to hate it, and you're allowed to then say that you're more important than that hatred. And you can actually tolerate feelings like self-hatred or disgust or, you know, resentment, anger,
deal with that fear and resistance that we have to do something.
Yeah.
You know, if we deal with the resistance, we can bypass that. We can then feel it, allow it to go, and then look at how we feel afterwards.
Yeah.
To get on and do some journaling if that's what we're doing. Because as you know, there's so many different ways that people can cover, and it's not all about journaling, but journaling can and often is a really helpful part of movement. And I know you did Nicole Sachs.
Yeah.
So you found that really helpful.
Yeah, and I can speak to this a little bit too, because I actually, and you'll probably laugh, I think I found Sarno's book like one Christmas and cracked it open and read a chapter, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna put that back on
Yeah,
the shelf.
that's so common, isn't it?
And then it took me a whole nother year to
Mm.
finally reach that point where I was like, I have nothing else to lose. Like, I have nothing to lose here doing this.
And that sadly is often when people come across this. Which is why the
Right.
more we can get this work out there, if we can encourage, get it out there so people actually learn about it sooner and it becomes the norm, then they don't have to go through all that.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, I think about that even, I think I was, this is interesting. So I just time wise, I really got hooked by Nicole Sachs's work. I think because the way she could simplify it was something that I could wrap my head around, and it made me feel safe, right? It made me feel like this is going to work and I feel safe. And that's why it was successful. But I would say, I think it was literally like a week before the pandemic hit and the world shut down, where I was like, Lily, you are going to do journal speak every day for a month, and it's just going to happen and it's just going to work.
Yes.
and I felt, so I would say it took me probably 3 months of just binging her whole podcast, Alan Gordon's podcast. Like, I think I'm blanking on his name. He has the YouTube channel. Anyways, he's got a YouTube channel. I think it's called Pain for You or something like that. And so I listened to him, and it like, I think it kind of primed me, expanded my brain to be like, this is a real thing. I think
that's really important, because you're hearing things said in a different way as well. So often we hear people who say, "Oh, I read that book, and that's it. It just clicked. I understand it." They might have read a number of books. It might be my book, or it might be they'd be worked with me for a while, and then read another book, and there's like, "Oh, yeah," and you just think, "Yeah, we've been talking about that." But it's about being in the right moment, the right time, reading it in a different way. There's so many things, because we know this is not an intellectual exercise. This is about having to go deeper, having those aha moments to be able to, and those are the ones that those deep aha unconscious letting go. That's when.
Absolutely. I mean, it sure would have been nice if I picked up that Sarno book in 2018, right? And like read that and was like, ding.
Do you think you would have learned as much though?
No.
I think that's the thing. And I've seen so many people who've read the book you covered, and then maybe down the line, because they haven't dealt with the other stuff.
Right.
Then actually another symptom comes after the same one. Or they do exactly the same. They read the book again, hoping it will help.
Wow.
Or even do some journaling, but not realize that often this is so much bigger. Looking at lifestyle beliefs, so many beliefs that we need to work on. So personality traits, all sorts of things that we need to do. And that, in fact, my newsletter that went out today, I was going out in the next 24 hours, is about the importance of hope, but even better, faith. And it sounds like in the pandemic, that's what you're putting out there. Faith, this is going to work. We're going to do this. It's so important.
Yeah.
And then it's not a quick fix. This is about a journey and recognize. And so many people on these webinars that we do just say they're so thankful for the journey they went on. They're thankful for the pain. It's so incredibly hard for people watching this now who might be in agony.
I was just thinking that.
Yes, because they just want to get rid of the pain. But then that puts pressure on. And this is about letting go. This is about surrendering, dealing with fears.
Yeah. There's something that you just said about finding that kind of faith, that kind of belief. And I think that it reminds me as a mental health clinician too, about this kind of general rule of thumb, which is when you're stepping more into your, I'm just a human and that's enough, and you have a capacity to make a choice sort of like an adult decision that you just feel aligned with and isn't high stakes, right? So you're not being triggered by your attachment, you're not being triggered by your trauma, you're not being triggered by past experiences, maybe you're not being triggered by your pain. It's like there is a capacity to do these sorts of things that I think really help people get out of that sort of green zone back into the yellow zone, which is a kind of a leap of faith.
Yes.
Like the ironic thing about trust as an adult is you have to fake it till you make it. You know, you have to have this like proof that you have something to trust, and and simultaneously hold this understanding that if it fails, you know, if you have a flare or a relapse, if the person rejects you, you know, if you start to get triggered and angry, it doesn't then make you all the way back at the start line, back in this belief of I'm bad or I'm broken. And that just feels like being able to navigate that for me, like just navigating that human system is what I feel like a skill, like I feel like I got in that process.
Absolutely. And with your work on the somatic work, I mean, we were talking before and you said that at that time when you were doing all your training all those years, you didn't really have that understanding that these physical symptoms could be a manifestation here, even though you were doing some work. So, but that presumably then became something else that you could utilize alongside the journaling, for example.
Definitely.
Really aware of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Work on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. You would probably get this. Like, think of how many medical professionals or mental health professionals who aren't in this sort of realm of research and understanding would be comfortable saying, oh yeah, I think your TMJ can totally go away, let's work on it.
Yeah,
right. Like it's a you know, we're sort of trained not to do that.
Well, absolutely. Yes, definitely. So I know people, when they're listening to this, always want to know, how long do you think it took? And I'm always wary to ask this. This is not about getting better quickly. This is not about putting pressure on ourselves as to how we can. But it's about, you know, understanding that this is the human experience. We are all going to have, you know, mind-body symptoms. So symptoms that are a result of unresolved emotions. About dealing with it in the moment now. You know, the trauma might have happened in the past. You know, that's happened in the past. It's about dealing with, if you're triggered now, something reminds your system of that. It's about dealing with this now. And how many of us, even if, you know, people say, oh, I'm 95% recovered. This is why I'm always wary about asking this question, because if that's the case, then I'm not 100% either. Because, you know, all of us are going to have a low mood, maybe a head or whatever that happens to be. Because maybe we're not, you know, we haven't jumped in and sort of been perfect in feeling our emotions all the time. So back to that question, roughly, to be able to function normally and to start your exercise again, how long do you feel?
Well, I can actually, you know, there was a long time in the wrong direction. And I feel like there are a lot more resources now than even 3-4 years ago. But I think, you know, I started journaling on the first day of April in 2020 or May. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. I journaled every day for a month. And I had like, I mean, like when I look and think about it, there was just such a massive upheaval. I think I could have grounded more during that time because it was so much.
Yes.
And, you know, I think it's this weird thing where I don't remember, you know, I don't remember the day that I was better because
I can imagine.
Right, because it doesn't really work that way. And one of the things that I signify as better is I I actually, like, when I no longer identified with having a chronic illness.
And I think that's so important. That's a crucial part, isn't it? You don't identify. It's like somebody who's a smoker, you know, and then they decide to give up smoking, and then they're a smoker who stopped smoking. The change, really, or a drinker who drinks, that change comes when they identify. Real change comes when they don't identify as being a smoker, drinker, or somebody with.
Yeah. And I think that once you believe that, once you see and believe that you can be sort of cured of this physical manifestation, then you have the choice to not identify with the label. So it's a messy process. And I had, I think the reason I'm sort of saying this is because I got significantly better in a couple months, like significantly. And then I think I had I remember my relapses, like, so normal, right? Such a part of the healing process.
Yeah.
And the prime opportunity to strengthen your brain.
Yes,
like
definitely.
I'm sort of that, like, classic, a client has a relapse and I'm like, yes, now we're going to really rut this new pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And I know you said that first time you were really fearful, but then the second time it happened, but you didn't go into the fear.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. The first time, I think it was my 30th birthday, and I was really faced with grieving the experience of spending almost my entire 20s in this really unwell place.
Yes.
And, I knew that. And, like, lo and behold, the symptoms popped up and I was like, ugh. This is just, you're probably getting a sense of, like, this is how I deal with my emotions. I need this little phase of being like, I don't want to.
Yes.
Okay, I'll do it. It still happens.
That's normal as well.
Yeah.
Very common.
And then, I would say the second relapse I had was pretty slight. And I think it, like, took me by surprise, but only for a second. And I was like, oh, yeah, but I don't have any of that pain fear cycle happening. I caught it in a second. And I was like, I have so much evidence, like, so much evidence. As soon as I felt grounded in the whole experience and just reminded myself, there is no tissue damage happening. You literally just got out of your chair at work and this other stuff's going on in your life. You started walking around and you started to be hypervigilant and you're activated. Okay. I think I journaled for 2 days and I kind of brought myself back into my emotional body. And then I was like, right, this is a safe place to be. It's fine. And it went away.
To do that, isn't it? To remind, okay, I've not been there. I need to keep reminding myself to spend some time noticing how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just reinforces that habit to look after yourselves.
Yeah.
So how different is life now for you? It's very different.
It's very different. It's very different. I think I'm training for my first ultra race, which is happening in less than a month. So I live in sort of the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and very technical terrain, pretty steep. And so trail running, I love it. I love it so much. And the race is a 50-mile race, and it was an interesting, like, level of coming back into being an athlete and really, really pushing my body, not just sort of, it took another level of consciously, like, I've taken a couple bad falls and I've gotten a couple strains, pains, things, all, and I'm like, yeah, this is human pain. You do a crazy intense thing with your body.
Yes, your body's saying, right, go back up a bit.
Exactly. And a previous athlete, Lily, probably would have taken some ibuprofen and just kept running. you know,
Yeah.
or been really pissed about it and pretended that she wasn't, or you know, been scared about how she might have lose control or not finish the race or whatever it is. So I think, you know, I'll feel those little things and I'm like, yep, that's fine. Like 2 rest days actually makes you stronger.
It's absolutely. And if you need an ibuprofen, you take an ibuprofen or whatever tablet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's been really fun. And like, I think having that very obvious physical pain and yeah, I think I wrote a post about it at one point when I started running again, and just like really feeling this place of, it is such a privilege to choose your pain, right? Like I'm doing these really big efforts and they are really painful, and it is so different than this sort of like monstrous, uncontrollable, like all over the place, terrifying pain that I know a lot of people know what I'm talking about, of having chronic pain symptoms.
Yes, and yet now then you went on to actually learn to trust the body. That would have been taken huge courage to do.
Yeah. I remember my first time I fell and I just broke down sobbing. And I think it was just this like trauma memory of being surprised by pain. Just having like your chronic pain flare up, you know, I know many people listening are going to know what I'm talking about, and kind of processing that, like just the immediate fear and the emotional pain of just going through that process of, you wake up one day and you're just in immense pain.
How great that you allowed yourself to cry.
Yes. Oh, I sure did. I sure did.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible story, Lily. It's really lovely to hear. I know that you yourself have syndrome as well. If we'll put a link at the end of this as well, so see where you are, what to do. Is there anything else that you feel you would like to share with advice or your learning? Anything else before we finish?
Yeah. It's such a good question. I mean, I think what I feel moved to say is like, it's okay to both absolutely, you know, it's okay to want your symptoms to be alleviated and to let that be a safe motivation while doing this process of, you know,
Yes.
Being disconnected from the outcome of treatment. And I think like, you know, there's it's a beautiful outcome in a lot of ways, and I am still just a messy human, you know, and I feel like that's so key to understand. You know, like my partner and I are working through all the trauma of this even still, you know, so I think that there's, you know, life continues to present things. And so one of the things that I like to kind of share is, I actually don't really think of chronic pain as a stress response, because I really see that all of my clients who get better and myself, you actually can, like, life is always stressful. We are always going like bombarded by stress, and so it's the us that we have to look at. It's the how we perceive, how does our psyche perceive this stress, how do we perceive ourselves, so we can like handle it.
So in other words, it's not the stressor, what's happening to us, it's how we're responding to the stressor, so that it's just like that government agency what's happening to us, how we respond to.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Lily. I really enjoyed this chat. And,
thank you.
Yeah, lovely to speak to you.
You too, Georgie. Thank you.
It will help a lot of people.